From being hugely famous historical fantasy shows to having book writers that can't keep up with the pace of their respective TV series. These are Game of Thrones mistakes that Outlander needs to avoid. Outlander and Game of Thrones have some eerie similarities. So many, in fact, that fans now think Outlander will need to avoid Game of Thrones mistakes in order to nail its ending. Thrones may have started off amazingly, but by the end, it was a mere husk of what the show used to be. By season 8, the series was pretty much unrecognizable to any longtime fan. All of the political intrigue, dialogue, and great characterization that once existed blew up with a poof, thanks to some dragon fire. Fans are now worried that Outlander's 8th and final season may end up repeating history, and that the show will fall victim to the exact same pattern as Game of Thrones. After all, the two shows are eerily similar. They're both based on books and turned into massively popular TV shows. Both of them have a historical fantasy setting and feature some really epic battles and attention to detail. Because of this, fans think that a terrible ending is going to end up joining their list of similarities. But before y'all start panicking, it's important to remember that the situation isn't entirely the same. Mostly because the author spoke about how she wants to avoid GOT's huge mistake. Diana Gabaldon has made her dissatisfaction with Thrones' ending quite clear in the past. She's actually been friends with George, so it makes sense why she wouldn't be on board with the final season. In fact, she even went as far as to say the show distorted his ending. In an interview with The Guardian, Diana stated she felt sorry for him. She mentioned that George told the writers what would happen in the books, so that they'd write accordingly. Except, they didn't. They took the stuff he wrote and completely distorted it to make this bizarre Frankenstein monster of an ending. It wasn't what he had in mind, but it used all the same plot points he came up with. Essentially, it turned out to be a mockery of George's work. Diana plans on avoiding this problem altogether. Unlike George, who wasn't able to keep up with the pace of the show, Diana said she wasn't going to let that happen to hers. She stated that they'll never catch her, and that she'll certainly finish the 10th book before they end the show. That's quite a bold claim, especially since in 2022, she mentioned that she's barely begun the 10th book, and it'll be a while before it's out. So I can't help but think Diana's sending out mixed messages. Despite her confidence, the fact of the matter is that the series' end isn't too far. Season 8 is set to be the final one for Outlander, and Season 7 is already on its way to fan screens this summer. Besides the fact that Thrones just passed ahead of Martin's source material, another big issue that fans had was just how rushed the ending was. It felt like it was trying to cram together 2 to 3 seasons worth of content into the final one. And from the looks of it, Outlander may unfortunately be heading in the same direction. Sure, Gabaldon made the claim that she'll never be caught, but it just doesn't seem possible that the final book will be out before Season 8. There's really only one way to avoid a disaster like what happened at King's Landing, and that's if she allows the writers to add in her unpublished endings from the books. Whether she's up for that is still a mystery, though. So yes, a bit of doomsaying is definitely warranted. And that's exactly what fans are doing. Many thought it was going to be quite bittersweet to see the show end, while others hoped to see the cast and crew nail the landing. But of course, it was impossible to avoid the Game of Thrones comparisons. Many fans just couldn't help themselves but point out the dangerous similarities between the show's final seasons. Personally, I can understand where the fans are coming from. With the final book not out yet, there's definitely cause to worry. But it's important to consider that Game of Thrones ran out of book content as early as Season 4. Some of Season 5, and most of Season 6 and beyond, were all original stuff, which kind of explains their quality. That's a lot of stuff to write. And I'm sure George's notes, while extensive, probably weren't enough to cover the lack of the books. So there's no surprise that the series ended up worse and worse as it went on. Outlander may be able to avoid that problem, considering it's just the final book that's missing. If Diana is able to work with the writers, letting them know what'll happen, it's possible that the show's ending may not suck as much as Thrones did. Speaking of the ending, fans are busy at work creating their theories for the finale. And let's just say, some of these are really crazy. For starters, some fans think that Jaime will die first. This calls back to a moment all the way back from season 1. Many viewers may remember that Frank spotted Jaime's ghost back then. He was staring up at Claire's window. And sure, tons of stuff has gone down since then. But it still excited fans questioning just what it meant. From the looks of it, Jaime will end up dying first, and Claire will return to her own time. As such, Jaime will be waiting in the afterlife for her to arrive. But not everyone thinks Claire will make it back to our time. Instead, a Reddit user even believes that she'll end up dying. Whether this is due to old age or some issue isn't all that important. But according to the Redditor, this will happen so that she can be born again in the future. At this point, she'd repeat all of the events together and essentially be stuck in a love loop. Now that would be a truly tragic ending. Thankfully, not all fans are so cynical. In fact, some of them think the show will actually give the characters a happily ever after. I mean, let's be real. The characters have already dealt with enough misfortune over the course of the show. And so, a happy ending may actually be really fitting for the show. A Redditor suggested that Claire and Jaime could just stay in the past, spending the rest of their days together and just simply not going back. But those aren't the only theories fans have for the show. Some fans think that Brianna's children may travel back in time. The show has already established the fact that not everyone can travel through the stones. But it's just not too clear just what quality it is that makes this possible. And so the fans think that Brianna and Roger's kids may actually travel back in time. Because of this, they'll end up much further back than any of the others had gone before. They'll end up staying there and end up becoming the ancestors of Claire, Gellis, and the other travelers. Did anyone mention Dark? Because this theory looks like it's been plucked directly from that show. But while her children might make it back, according to another theory, Brianna won't be as lucky. A Redditor thinks she'll end up dying. But since Bree has traveled through time a few times, it's possible that another version of her may end up showing up out of nowhere. If that really happens, then it may end up becoming a sad and somewhat confusing ending. But hey, it does sound pretty fun still. There you have it, folks. Those are Game of Thrones mistakes that Outlander needs to avoid.